This is the final budget report for Class EDU 528 at William Woods University by Amy McDonald. The overall rationale for this project was that there was $69,000 in the operating budget for 12 athletic teams. That averages out to about $5,750 per team. In this case, I decided that equal money was not going to be given for each team because some sports naturally have higher costs. Usually, teams that have higher costs are due to larger team size or higher equipment costs. Some teams were able to keep all or most of their requests. Some teams didn't get to keep many items at all, and others, in order to keep the cost down, had to have many modifications for their budget requests. The budget guidelines that I used were that there were some items that were kept completely, some were modified, and some were cut out completely. Any items that were not utilized by more than one individual were not funded. So things like sneakers or items that only were to be used once during one season were not going to be funded. Any specialty items that weren't absolutely necessary were also another piece that were not funded, which we will see later on in some of the sports. The teams that were typically only granted one big ticket items that were over, I would say $1,000 would be considered a big ticket item, or over $500. The fielding supplies other than softball were not accepted due to the fact that the field maintenance and the DPW of the town are responsible for keeping the fields in good use. So the fielding supplies, for example, during baseball season, were not part of the general athletic budget in this case. Any of the items that weren't covered would be funded by external sources such as the booster clubs or fundraisers. So even though these items were not funded by the general budget, they may have been covered at some other point during the season. So the final budget breakdown was that the total budget requested was $183,184.94, with a total budget allotted of $69,000. There must have been $114,184.94 that must be cut from the budget. So 62% of the budget requested would have to be cut in this particular case. So, as mentioned previously, the average amount allotted per team was $5,750, but that was just a number that was kept in mind when breaking down each team. After looking at the numbers, the total budget that was actually spent for the 12 teams was $60,384.60, which left $8,615.40 in the budget. Here we can see the final breakdown of each team, which we will go through for each team slide. So that it'll show their total cost that they requested, the total cost that was actually spent on that team, and the percent of the budget, of the allotted budget that that team actually spent. So as we look at the spreadsheets for each team, the green highlighted section were that was keeping all of the requested items. The red highlighted items were items that all were cut, and the yellow highlighted items were modified. So that was typically when a program requested a certain number and modifications were made to reduce the number in order to keep the cost down for that specific team. Looking at the girls lacrosse program, their budget was all fully accepted, so their Their total cost was $4,005.83. They spent 6% of the allotted budget. They were able to get a case of balls, both home and away jerseys, with one singular color skirt that would go with both home and away, which is a great idea to keep costs down. With that in mind, they were able to get practice pennies because they saved money on their game skirts. They also requested some items that would have been split between the boys and the girls lacrosse program, so they only asked for one net and one target and cheaper items than some other sports requested. So they spent $4,005.83 of the budget. The boys volleyball program requested $17,692.67 and were only approved for $6,332.65. So the difference between their requested and their actual expenditure was about $11,000. So the jerseys were fully accepted for all 40 of the men's uniforms. Looking at the other items, there were many modifications made. As you can see, that $17,000 was a big item, was a big total. So as I looked through the items, I realized that it was not necessary for this program to buy 3 new volleyball systems that cost almost $2,000 each in one season. So I brought that down to one system, because typically if you're using one volleyball system on a court, there's no need for 3. And if there was a need for 3, it would have to be spent throughout the course of a few years, as that's considered a big ticket item. Most of their items requested were dropped down to either 1 or 2, as each of their costs had a large ticket price on them, so their costs went down several, almost $11,000. The men's track and field program had requests for some pedal adapters, batons, uniforms, singlets, and warm-ups, as well as shoes. So all items in their program were accepted except for this shoes, because as mentioned in the guidelines, we would not be accepting any items that were used for one person for one season, so they couldn't be reused. So their requested amount was $2,317, and without the shoes, the accepted cost for their program was $1,667. So their expenditure compared to the allotted amount was 2%. So football is a high cost program to run, as you can see. The things that they put in were not many, but they are things that do cost a lot of money. So the $77,674.85, that's actually more than what we were even allowed to work with for the total budget. So that number had to come down drastically in order to be able to work with the other 11 teams in the program. So what I decided to do here for this particular season was grant the program, instead of 100 home uniforms, I was able to get them home shirts, home jerseys, and home pants for 50 people. Typically a football roster is about, for a varsity program or for an NFL team, is about 52. So I used the number 50 and cut the 100 in half in order to be able to get them home jerseys and home bottoms. Um, we would be able to hopefully purchase the away uniforms on an off year when the costs would not be so high. Another thing that I believe is important is the safety of players, so rotating those helmets into the program. But as you can see, that's a very high cost. So instead of getting 30 into the program, we were able to get 15 into the program and still have money left to spend for the other team. So again, that would be something that would get rotated every year for the helmet's sake, and potentially those jerseys in another year. So football actually spent $13,974.95, which made up almost 20% of the allotted budget, which is the highest, as you will see in the sports given. Wrestling was an interesting program to work with, as some of their requests were not requests that were typically seen by other programs. So the amounts that were approved were for items that were equipment or cleaning supplies, equipment, uniforms, things necessary for the program. So shoes were something that were taken off the list. The hotels and the tournament food were not accepted in this because a $16,000 request for one program, again, would have been a high price considering there's 12 other programs to think about. The new mat the majority of that cost was about $10,500, and it seemed from the rationale that that mat was not needed, as they may have had a new one in the past few years. So that would have been an item that would be purchased hopefully sometime within the next few years, when it is definitely needed, when other items on their wish list are not needed as a top priority. Coaches gear is something that was not funded, as it is not typically not funded by any of the budget in our athletic program. So the wrestling actual expenditure was $2,450, which made up about 4% of the allotted athletic budget. Girls softball, this was a request that didn't ask for any equipment or physical equipment for the players to use, or for uniforms, or any of the typical things that we saw on any other budgets. So instead of, they requested $36,000, which again would have been almost half of the money needed for the 12 teams. So instead of not allowing the softball program any of their request, I allowed them to get their top pick, which was the enclosed and bigger dugouts, as that was a price tag that was just over the average allotted per team, which again I said that we were not sticking with, but just something to keep in mind. So the girls softball team spent about 9% of the total budget for their enclosed and bigger dugouts, but would in this case have to sacrifice equipment and uniforms for this particular year if they would like to get something like this. The girls track program asked for batons, shot puts, and indoor shot puts, some equipment, and uniforms for the players in the program. Again, this was a very small request, at about $1,558.65. So all of their requests were not big ticket items, and were items that were able to be funded because it only took up 2% of the allotted budget. The baseball program asked for almost $35,000 worth of uniforms, equipment, other fielding supplies. So I was not able to fund the field conditioner, which was a large ticket item at $20,000 this year, as the DPW typically handles that, and if not, we would be able to work that number down to a smaller number year by year and not purchase that amount of infield conditioner for the program since it's such a high cost. So we were able to get them their first three big ticket items priority were their jerseys, the baseballs, and batting helmets. Those are the pretty much the basic things that they need for their program. And we were able to get some other items that were not as a big ticket item. So the beam clay home plate and the pitcher, the clay bags, the field paint boxes, those were items that were very expensive for them this year. So we had to bring the cost down. So the baseball team actually only will be able to spend $3,963.62 in order to spend 6% of the allotted budget. Again, some of these items could be rotated over the years, but because they asked for such big ticket items in their wish list, they were not able to get them all. The girls volleyball program had a pretty simplistic wish list where they asked for new uniforms, game volleyballs, and practice volleyballs, but on their request they also asked for shoes. So again, that was something that was not able to be funded based on the guidelines that I used for this assignment. So they asked for $4,849, and taking off the shoes from their wish list, they will only be spending $2,549, which will account for 4% of the athletic allotted budget. The girls basketball program pretty much only asked for new jerseys, practice jerseys, some balls used for games and practices, and a few little housekeeping things for coaches, as well as the ball locker, which was last on their priority list. So looking at the things that were on their list, I was able to grant them all of the items on their wish list except for the monster ball locker. So that, because that was so low on their priority, that was something that I didn't fund this particular year because the uniforms were at such a high cost, but will be used for a few years. Another item that I highlighted here was the Nike Pinnacle Mesh 3.0 jersey, which was a practice jersey. So initially, because I saw that price at $60 for a practice jersey, I was not going to fund it since they were getting new game jerseys. But because the practice jerseys, when I looked them up, they were actually only $30, I was able to fund that. If they were $60 for a practice jersey, that's almost the price of a game jersey, so I wouldn't have funded that this year. But since the price was actually half the price that was originally posted, it was able to be funded. So the cost that they requested was $8,120, and they were able to receive everything but the ball locker, which gave them a expenditure of $7,061. That makes up about 10% of the athletic budget. Girls soccer also asked for new jerseys, some soccer balls, and practice jerseys. So this year I decided that since they were getting all new game jerseys, which included shirts, shorts, and socks, that they would get everything except for the practice jerseys, and the practice jerseys could be funded at a different point in time. So their cost that they asked for was $7,000, and without those practice jerseys, they were able to spend $6,500, which was just over the average allotted amount. And considering there were sports who spent significantly less than that, I was able to fund this amount for the girls soccer team, and they would be spending about 9% of the athletic budget. Lastly, the men's basketball program asked for a fair amount of items: basketballs, uniforms, the Huddle video subscription, which is for film, a scorebook, a few things, housekeeping for the trainer's kit, clipboards, a new rim, which was explained, was something that I was able to fund. One thing that, because practice uniforms, that big ticket item for them would be considered the Huddle subscription this year, so I wasn't able to fund the $700 whiteboard, as I didn't find that to be as important as some of the other things on this list. And the TV and the Chromecast is something that we haven't had in our program for any team, so that was something that maybe we'd look at in the future, to get a TV and a Chromecast for all teams to use in a film room, but is something that we just weren't able to fund yet with the given budget this year. So men's basketball, all the items that they were asking for totaled to be $4,851.89, and without that $700 whiteboard, the TV, and the Chromecast, they were able to get all other items that were $3,821.90, which makes up about 6% of the allotted athletic budget. The remaining budget that is left was made up 13%. So with the $69,000 that was allotted, after looking at all 12 of the sports teams, we can see that $60,384.60 was the amount that was spent from the budget, which leaves $8,615.40 remaining, which could cover some other things for the program. So with that, there's 13% of the budget remaining for other day-to-day or other items